have a more intimate conversation if that's the case, but it's okay. All right, so this session is about Windows 10 and Azure Active Directory. How many of you have attended some of the previous sessions in Windows 10, just Windows 10? Okay, many of you. What about Azure AD? Okay, so what we are going to talk today about is what are all those new experiences in Windows that will make Windows a great device to do work, from everywhere, from different devices, and allow users to be productive, while at the same time allowing admins to have the controls and the management and controls of the access to resources from these devices. So I want to give a little bit of context on why we're doing this work. And at Microsoft, we've seen how the industry and the practices for accessing different resources have evolved in the last 10, 15 years. So on one hand, we have users who want to be productive from their own devices, working from everywhere, from home, if they're at work or on the go. And then on the other hand, we have admins that worry about access control and data protection. They don't want to have data leaked to some cloud or some device that they don't have control of. And in the middle, we have these informational assets that, encompass applications, data, that are the ones that are effectively delivering the business side of the organization. So we have two different personas that in some way we could think that they have conflicting requirements. And probably you've seen in different sessions before how those requirements kind of fight against each other. On one side, I want to be productive. I want to have access to more resources. Admins want to have control and want to have the hold of these resources. So at Microsoft, we have 4 different pivots, if you will, to make sure that enterprise mobility is real. Basically, we want to enable the experiences that meet requirements for both users and admins from 4 different perspectives. One, of course, is desktop virtualization. Here's where we have, remote apps, remote desktops. We have information protection to make sure that data is protected everywhere, in transit, at rest, that is encrypted. And here's where we have RMS, Azure Active Directory with RMS, for example. And then, of course, we have the part of management for devices and applications in a way that you can control different knobs and parts of the device that you can close a little bit so you manage that access control. But then there's a 4th pivot, which is kind of the foundation across all the other pivots, and that is identity. So if you think about 15 years ago, we kind of revolutionized how organizations enabled users to be productive. Who can tell me what was that? Right? In 2000, we introduced Active Directory, and then with that, we introduced a very particular tool that was called domain join, very simple. With that tool, devices, computers, PCs in an organization would register, with a central directory, would get an identity to that directory, and then the organization would gain control on that device. And then that, what was the tool that allowed to do that? Somebody? That would allow you to control those devices? Exactly, group policy, GPOs. So now with this technology, you could control thousands of knobs in devices in a way that you could control, specific behaviors, and that you could basically, impact how these devices would interact with the organization. Now, that was a great story for about, let's say, 8, 10 years, because our systems were very closed. So we have a corporate network, maybe you had a perimeter network protected by a firewall, but everything was very, very closed. It was very controlled. And when, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when users started to become more mobile, you kind of started opening some ports in the perimeter network, in your DMC, allowing some access from the outside, but your control was right there. So you had, in a way, your life was easy, in some ways, because the number of devices that you had, you knew exactly how many devices, you knew exactly what platform of devices were accessing resources, exactly what resources were in your control and such. But then, the reality is that changed tremendously. And now we have devices for multiple platforms. We have Windows, iOS, Android. We have phones, tablets, PCs. Users who are on the go, users who never need to come to the on-premises network, like sales representatives out there in the field, which is where you want them to be. You don't want them to be coming to your corporate network to just, deploy some trivial GPO that will give them access to some resource. Then we have applications. These applications were not just scoped to your corporate network, but now we have thousands and thousands of cloud applications, different vendors, and then we have all these points of interaction that in a way makes the life of an admin very complicated. So in order to understand how I, as an admin, can rationalize this complexity, then we need to understand that as 15 years ago, the key piece of that was the identity, when we had user identities, computer identities, and then we have authorization based on the identities of these entities. Identity will keep being that foundation even in this ecosystem. So how many of you or your customers have deployed on-premises Active Directory? Probably everyone here. Depending on how what statistic you use, Active Directory is deployed in around 90+% of the organizations, even if there are other directories around. But then that was great. We had this solution, these tools, and of course now we have this new challenge of applications in the cloud, and then we have Office 365, Salesforce.com, Box, and all these services that are coming into play. So then Azure Active Directory is going to be that tool, that entity that will make sure that you can connect both worlds, your hybrid, your on-premises world, and the new world in the cloud, and that's what makes you effectively a hybrid organization. So how many of you or your customers are already in the cloud in some way? Okay, that's pretty good. For those of you who didn't raise your hands, by any chance, do your customers have Office 365? Okay, so this is something that I've noticed when you guys came to the booth and we talked about, and I asked, hey, are you guys in the cloud? Do you guys have Azure AD? And the answer is no, we don't have it. And we are evaluating it, but we really don't have it. By the way, do you guys have Office 365? And they say yes. So that answer amazes me a little bit, because by the fact that you have Office 365, you already have Azure Active Directory. Probably we'll talk a little bit about this. But then Azure AD is that foundation that will glue the on-premises world with the new cloud world with a simple connection, We have this enabler that is called AAD Connect that very simply, in a few steps, you can come from on-premises and become hybrid right away. Regardless if you want to use federation, like installing ADFS on premises, or you are okay with having your users' password hashes going to the cloud, AAD Connect will allow you in very simple steps to get to the cloud. And of course, then the rest is the magic that Azure Active Directory will do. Users will enjoy SSO and all these nice experiences, and the ones that I'm going to talk about in Windows 10, plus a set of self-service experiences that will empower users to be productive on their own while, having the ability for admins to govern that behavior without having a lot of cost on IT to enable those experiences. So one other thing that we did in Windows 8.1 was that we connected Windows to the cloud. And the way we did that was that now you could buy your Windows 8.1 phone or your Windows 8.1 tablet, and you could set up that device using your Microsoft account. So you could say, I'm going to use my Hotmail account or my Outlook account, my Live account, and by virtue of you doing that, you had new experiences that became live by the fact that the device was connected to the cloud. Who can tell me, you can scream, you can basically shout out, what are those experiences? Probably you guys have used them already, but who can say that? Wireless. Okay. What else? Installed apps, exactly. What's that again? IE favorites. So that's exactly right. So now, when you had your phone, your tablet, your tablet, PC, or desktop, and you set up those devices with your Microsoft account, then across all those devices, you would have a consistent experience. You would have your favorites roaming across those devices. You will have tiles that are consistent across devices. You'll have notifications, live tiles, and then Windows takes this life out of that cloud account. But then, enterprises started looking at that, and actually they liked that very much. But then we started receiving some feedback around that. They said, it's great that we have that, we want that, but we cannot use consumer accounts. We have examples of organizations that actually have enabled these experiences by asking their users to go and create Hotmail accounts, a secondary Hotmail account that is like the corporate identity, given a specific format, a specific number of characters and things like this. But then that in itself became unmanageable. We have heard from education. Who is in education here? All right, some of you guys in the back, that some of your students don't have even AD on-prem accounts. And this goes to other organizations as well, vendors that would do some engagement at the organization, that they do not need to have any access to on-premises, but they will need to have some access to Office 365 or some cloud application. They would have only AAD accounts. So, these challenges came to us, and then what we've done in Windows 10 is actually an evolution of that using Azure Active Directory accounts. So we are introducing what we are calling Azure AD Join. And this is kind of like the new generation of that same concept that we had 15 years ago for domain join, but now enabling these experiences, connecting on-premises to the cloud. And think of this as 3 value propositions. Like for you guys who are trying to understand what is the value prop so you can go and sell to your organization, your customers, or if you are evaluating, deploying devices in your own organization. One is there's seamless access to enterprise applications. That means that you are not required anymore to set up your device with your Microsoft account to get some of these nice experiences, but now a work or a school account, an Azure AD account, or even an on-prem AD account can be used to enable these experiences. This would go across company-owned devices as well as personal devices. It would enable single sign-on, and when I'm saying single sign-on, it's true single sign-on. You go, log on with your account in Windows, and truly you will have access to your resources on-prem and cloud without entering credentials anymore. And of course, this would work from everywhere. If you are at your home, you're traveling, if you are at work, that will be true across. Now, that is great for users. Now, for admins, we have the ability to have that kind of same concept of group policy, but now we're moving into this concept of mobile device management. The admin can set up Azure AD Join in such a way that every device that registers with Azure AD gets enrolled into the MDM, like Intune or some third-party MDM. And of course, within Microsoft, we have the Enterprise Mobility Suite, which is a great set of features that will enable these experiences end-to-end. From Windows 8.1 to Windows 10, another thing that we changed was the amount of flexibility that admins could control on devices. We have a component in Windows that is called the OMADM component, which is basically a layer that will translate management settings into the device. And in Windows 8.1, it was a little bit limited, and it was not consistent across devices. Now in Windows 10, we have gotten the feedback from many of you, and we have extended that range of settings, which is not a full GPO set of settings, because the world is different, but of course it's good enough for you to manage and control these devices. And that it will be consistent across phones, tablets, and PCs. We are working on having the ability to be consistent across multiple factors, form factors, as you saw the universal applications, but also in the identity pieces. Later in the year, we will be able to have, say, for example, a phone that you can log on into that phone, kind of like WinLogon does in a PC. Of course, we will have experiences that accommodate the different form factors, but the key point is that there's consistency across all Windows form factors. And of course, when you have devices that you can manage, you can control access, you can create rules that will allow access to devices that, say, for example, are compliant, and you would reject access from those who are not. So this is kind of what would be the replacement of NAP. How many of you have used NAP in the past? Network access protection, so a couple of you. So this is quite important because in that front we are also evolving to these modern experiences as well. And then of course we, as being part of Windows, we in Azure Active Directory and Active Directory on premises, we are supporting the Microsoft Passport set of credentials. Who attended the Microsoft Passport sessions on Wednesday and today, maybe a couple of you? So this is actually very exciting. It is a way for you to reduce, and actually I would say even remove, but I received feedback that probably remove is too absolute, but reduce the risk of credential theft. So all the problems that we have with passwords, that they are phishable, you can have your password stolen, and then somebody can impersonate you from a different place, different device. With Microsoft Passport, that is not the case. And I'll get into a little bit more of details on the deep dive in a second. But then, of course, now with the Azure AD account in Windows connected to the cloud, now users will be able to go to an enterprise-compliant store. So you as an admin, you can say, I want to select these 25 applications out of the more than 2,500 apps that we have integrated in Azure AD for users to go and deploy and and download. No more than these 25. And then using the Azure AD account, then you will be able to enforce that. And then, of course, we'll have this enterprise compliant roaming, which is very similar to what we did with the settings in Windows 8.1. But the difference is that these settings, application settings, operating system settings, won't go into the consumer cloud, but it will go into a specific compliant enterprise cloud that organizations will enjoy, because now work and play will not be in the same cloud. And that is a worry that many admins have. They don't want enterprise data in a consumer cloud. They want to have it controlled in a specific cloud. So if we think about the two models that we have now for corporate-owned devices, one is the traditional domain join, and we'll see how even that traditional model becomes better with Azure AD. And then we have the option of joining devices directly to Azure AD. And this is what will serve the CYOD. We have, all these acronyms like BYOD, bring your own device, CYOD, choose your own device. So Azure AD Join will allow an organization to enable users to set up their own devices while keeping the ownership of that device in the organization. We made, some good investments in Windows 8.1 and Windows Server 2012 R2 to enable BYOD, personal devices accessing to the organization with technologies like Workplace Join, work folders, the web application proxy, and so on. And of course, the Azure AD application proxy, which is the better version of it. But then domain join in Windows 10 is traditional domain join, only better. A domain join device, that is Windows 10, will automatically register with Azure AD. And I'll show you how those flows when you enter your credentials in WinLogon, how that changes in Windows 10 in a minute. Now, this is great for organizations that already have processes in place to deploy domain join devices. You don't need to change those processes. You can just enjoy the new benefits of having Windows 10 domain join devices. And then, of course, you can keep using your existing on-prem management solutions like SCCM, for example, and then even there are some investments in SCCM that will enable some of the experiences in Windows 10, like Microsoft Passport, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Now, Azure AD Join is a great way to go for enabling users to set up devices on their own using the work or school account. So in a similar way that Windows 8.1 received a Microsoft account to set up that device, then we are extending that to use an Azure AD account. Primarily, this would be for users and devices who access Office 365, cloud-based applications, and occasionally, maybe they go and come to the on-premises network, and let's say they need to print a file or a document or access a file share. That will work as well, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit more. And then, of course, this Azure AD Join model will work with MDM. So SCCM is not in the picture, is now MDM. So let's take a look at one scenario. So Kelly works for a company that provides services to Contoso. So Contoso has the practice of providing AD accounts for vendors who are engaged in, let's say, long-term projects. Kelly is one of them. And then now she's starting a new project, and she receives some allowance from Contoso to purchase a device that she can self-configure. So let me jump into how that would look like. So I'll jump into my demo machine here. And let's imagine that now Kelly, goes to any of the stores, opens the device, and for the first time, she turns that device on. So she will see a number of screens that will come from the OEM, but one of them, in this case, I'm already connected to the network, so it is not asked to connect to Wi-Fi. So when she comes, she just goes through the out-of-box experience, and then when she chooses use express settings, now what is happening right now is one of the changes that we have compared to what we have in Windows 8.1. The out-of-box experience in 8.1 was such that there were some screens, some pages from the OEM, and some pages that would ask the user to set up the device with the account and things like this. But all that, until the point the user would log on, either auto log on or they would type the credentials in the logon UI, that was under a system context. So there was no really a user context in which those pages would run under. Now, when Kelly did use express settings, and you saw that done at saying, wait a moment, what happened was that we created a standard user. It's a default user that will have limited privileges on the box, but will have a specific access to some particular APIs that will make the first run experience possible. Now, the reason why we do that is because from this point on, the experience will be web-based. So the page that you are looking at right now, for example, is not a page that lives in Windows. It's a page that lives in the cloud, that Windows trusts and runs, and then orchestrates across the first run experience. So the first thing that Kelly will see is this page. This page is asking Kelly, who owns this device? And I want to say something else here. So in Windows, we have, in general, we have three SKUs. We have the home SKU, specific for consumers, personal devices. We have the enterprise SKU, which is intended for organizations, where, by the way, domain join is enabled. And then we have in the middle the professional SKU. Professional SKU is that SKU in which, some users could use for personal devices, some more for the enterprise. This page is not available in home, and it's not available in an enterprise. It's only available in professional. The home SKU will assume that that device is a personal device. The enterprise SKU will assume that that is an organizational device. This disambiguation page only happens in the professional SKU, which is what Kelly obtained. So Kelly says, okay, this is pretty straightforward. This is not my device, it's my organizational device. And then she will see, some page about, hey, heads up, Kelly. What you're going to do is basically a way for you to set up the device to your organization, and your organization will have control of that device moving forward. By the way, given that this is web content, we are still iterating in the format and even the wording. So do not pay attention a lot to the wording, but get the idea on what's happening behind the scenes. So she says, okay, yes, that's what I intended to do. And she gets to see this signing page. Now, I'm going to use not Kelly's account, but my account at a tenant that I created for this purpose, for this demo. It's basically a tenant on Microsoft.com. It is super easy to go and try it out. You can go to Azure, manage.azure.com, and then you can create a trial subscription, or if you have one, you can just go ahead and even try this right now. But then in this particular case, so let's assume that Kelly authenticates, and then one important point here, oh my gosh, I had my cell phone off, but in this particular case, the admin has set up that any new device that comes into the organization, into the Azure Active Directory, will need to, to provide a second factor of authentication. And that is basically configuring the Azure portal. I will show you in a minute. But while this comes up, then in the Azure portal, you can say by default, I want to allow some users to Azure AD join devices, or I want to allow everybody, or I want to basically prevent anybody from doing this. But at the same time, I want to have these users providing a second factor of authentication, given that, this could be happening from a hotel room, for example, and anybody could do that. Like if somebody steals the password of a user, you might want to make sure that that user is who he or she is before you can even, register a device. All right, so let me come back to that in a moment. But while the user authenticates, and you will see this in a minute, then what would happen is that the orchestration, the web application that orchestrates that first run experience, will take a token that is obtained thanks to this authentication provided by Azure AD, in particular by Evo STS. Evo STS is the secure token service in the cloud, and will issue an access token for Azure DRS. Azure DRS is the one who is receiving that token and who is registering that device. So here, I'll do this. Let's try to do that again, given that I had my phone off. So as I was saying, then Azure DRS takes that access token. It will issue a certificate to the device. That certificate is going to be the identifier that is held by that device and will be presented to Evo STS in future authentication. And then Azure DRS will create a device object in Azure Active Directory where becomes the new identity of that device. So let's try again. In this case, I do my organization, and I am going to authenticate again. Yes, question here. Okay, the question was, can the OTP or the second factor of auth can be a custom method of auth? And the answer to that is yes. Let me very quick enter my code here, and I'll get into the details of that answer. But so my code here, 152.755, and now, in order to answer your question, or actually your second question, what I want to say is that I enter my username and password. At that point, authentication hasn't happened yet. It is when I provide my second factor of auth that actually, Evo has both credentials and then authenticate against ID that a token is issued. So regardless if I had it, first one or not, it wouldn't really matter because there's no authentication happening. But then, to your first question, if you are a federated organization and you have ADFS, for example, ADFS has a way to hook up third-party, MFA providers, and then you can extend that way. Now, on those lines, let's try again, but now let's do this with a federated tenant. So I'm going to use the Microsoft tenant. I will try to register a device to the Microsoft organization, which, by the way, is a federated organization. We have deployed ADFS on premises. And what you will see is that when I type my credential, my UPN or my email address on that very first page, I will be redirected to the ADFS page. And in that particular case, if ADFS requires some third-party MFA, then that's when I will provide my proof. And then in that dance, what would happen is that I'm going to Evo STS. Evo STS redirects to ADFS. ADFS takes the credentials, authenticates me, sends a token to Evo, and Evo then takes the token and issues a token for Azure DRS. So let's take this example. I say this is a device that is owned by my organization. And when I come here, I'm going to type my UPN here. So I'm going to do tab, and notice that at this point, automatically, I am redirected to my ADFS page. So in this case, I can say I want to use phone factor, which is what we have in MSIT. So in this particular case, it is ADFS who is receiving that second factor and is making a call to my phone. So I enter the PIN in my phone, ADFS gets that, issues the token, Evo gets the token to Evo, Evo issues the token to Azure DRS, and Azure DRS registers that device. All right, so let me jump very quick here. So in this particular case, notice that I'm going to use my Microsoft account in the cloud, my UPN, that I have mistyped. All right, there you go. And then I will sign in to that device, which is Azure AD Join only, and then I will be basically, at this particular point is when the actual user, that is the NT user that is associated with my Azure AD account is created, the profile is created, and then I go directly to the desktop. Yeah, question here.
So even though you have MFA set up with phone factor right now, when you logged in there, you didn't have to use it to log in.
Right. The question was, when I logged into Windows, I didn't need to provide my MFA. In this particular example, MFA was required only for Azure DRS. So in order for me to register a new device, I need to prove with a second factor. You could very well have, like any user who logs onto a Azure AD Join device, for example, needs to provide MFA. And the way that will work is actually you will enter your credentials, you will sign in, like effectively Windows will log you in, but then we have something that we call interrupts. So before you get into the desktop, you will see an interrupt, a web-based flow that tells your organization requires you to do MFA before you can log on to this device. Please provide it. So that's a way that also you can control that. So let's try to do and try to understand what is it that we did here. Okay, so let's go one by one. So what I will do here is use a pen to draw what happened. So first of all, we have here the device, the nice device here. It's a laptop. And then somewhere here in the cloud, we have Azure AD, right? This is our magic glue. On one side, we have Azure DRS. So Azure DRS is, again, the service that registers that device. And then on the other side, let's say we have our MDM, let's say Intune. So when I turned on the device for the first time and I was presented out with the Evo STS signing page, what I did was I provided my credentials to Azure AD, including my second factor of auth. Azure AD issued the device a token. When you are authenticating with Azure AD, it is not just give me a token, but it's give me a token for a specific audience, for a specific resource. In this particular case, the resource is Azure DRS, so the client will send that up to Azure DRS. Azure DRS will authorize based on the claims of the token and all that. And then once that happens, there are two interactions. One, Azure DRS goes to Azure AD and writes a device object. So similar to a computer object for a domain join device, now we have a device object in the cloud for that device. And then Azure DRS will issue a certificate to the device, which is the identity, the identifier that device will use later on when presenting credentials to Azure AD for device authentication. So that happened, and actually all that happened when you saw that donut saying, wait, some processing is happening. At the same time, when we did that authentication, we didn't only get an access token for Azure DRS, but we also got an SSO code. Let's think about that like a token that then I can also use to go and request tokens for some additional service. So in this particular case, the device MDM enrollment API in Windows will send that SSO code to Azure AD to request a token to Intune. So in this particular case, Intune is a relying party or an application of Azure AD. Azure AD will issue that token, and then the API will send that token to Intune, and Intune will send a certificate to the device for establishing a management station later on. So we have a couple of questions.
I'm just wondering if the mechanisms behind this ADRS is the same as the DRS mechanism on the on-prem ADFS. I mean, using the same claims and all that kind of stuff.
Right. The question was whether the Azure DRS protocols were similar or were the same than the ones that DRS in ADFS use. And the answer is that it's an extension of that. So it's basically OAuth-based, and there's a new protocol. But one thing that we want to do, and that is coming in Server 2016, maybe for those who attended, actually, by the way, who attended Sam's session on Future ADFS and ADDS? Okay, some of you. So what we're doing in Server 2016 is that for those customers, organizations that are on-prem only, that they do not have cloud whatsoever, ADFS 2016 will have the same protocol. So you will be able to basically, support device registration against on-premises. There was another question here.
How did the device know about Intune as opposed to some other MDM?
Great question. So how the device knows about Intune? So there's a setting in Azure AD portal. Now what we're doing is that the admin can set up what is the MDM that belongs to this tenant. So let's say, for example, in the case of Microsoft.com, we would have that setting that would be in tune. And when this very first flow happens, when Azure DRS comes here and basically gives the certificate back to the device, it will also tell what is that MDM. And basically, it will tell three things. What's the terms of use URL? So if the MDM wants to show an additional page for terms of use, like a custom page, for example, the orchestrator will show that page before. The second one is what's the actual management enrollment URL, which is the one that the API in Windows will use to go and register the device with, enroll the device with. And then there's a third one that it's about compliance URL, but it's not important at this point. Another question here.
When you do this, all the information or attributes you write to the Azure AD. If you have already connected your internal AD, will the attributes then flow down to the internal AD?
Okay, the question was, once you write those new attributes, new objects in Azure AD, will those go down to on-prem AD? And the answer is, if you want, yes. And in which cases you would want that? Maybe if that cloud domain join, that Azure AD join device is going to access on-premises resources, and you want to enforce access control to those on-prem resources, that's a great use case in which you want those devices coming down to on-prem. If those devices are only used by these users who are vendors who never come to on-prem, then you would probably leave them in the cloud. Another question here. Two, all right. So, okay. And the second one. Okay. So, two questions. One was, it was about, what capabilities that I have shown here are premium or not. So, first of all, the business, licensing is still being developed, but what I can say is that we are making ubiquitous, like Azure AD Join would work in any particular subscription of Azure AD. So even in the free version would work. Now, of course, with premium, you will get more things. Like, for example, the question about writing back to on-prem. All those will require AD Premium. So depending on your scenarios, you may have some capabilities that will not work on the free version or the basic version. But in general, like if you are Office 365 customer and you have devices that will access just those cloud apps, you don't need to have that. And the second question was about enrolling on behalf of. So the answer is, yeah, I mean, when we did this, we did it with the user. The same user who was using that device did it. But imagine that you could be an admin doing that same process, shutting down the device. Next time that the real user gets that device, they will see the logon UI. And given that this is very similar to domain join, now any user on that organization can log on to that device. What we are doing later in the year, not for GA right away, is that you could automate that process, and let's say you can set up 100 devices with Azure AD Join with one specific credential, such that when those users get the devices, they just log on. But that will come later in the year. The question is, for the user who is joining the device to Azure AD, are those admins on the device? And the answer is yes. Yes and but. So there are two settings that you can control as an admin in Azure AD that are who can be admin on devices. Like, if you have an IT admin group that might need to get into these devices, and who can log on to device. So you can control those settings. The initial approach is that whoever joined the device is an admin on the device, and it cannot be demoted. I mean, we would be open to hear feedback if that's something that customers might want to change, but at least that's the way it is today.
And I'm assuming that the provisioning package session that was talking about building that would walk through all
Yes,
that.
exactly. So the question was the provisioning package session in which we talked about, about provisioning packages. Will that fit with Azure AD? And that's exactly what I was referring that later in the year, we will be able to do these kind of things, setting up a batch of devices using provisioning packages, precisely. Another question here.
Would you be able to, I'm talking a bit about the concept in Windows 8.1 with the workplace join. Would you be able to use this Azure AD join in regards to community user setup, where the admin actually registers the device via the Azure AD join, and then multiple users would be able to use that device, and you can filter on if that device is registered or not?
Okay, so I think there are kind of two questions. Maybe you correct me if I'm wrong. One is in relation to what workplace join has been in Windows 8.1, and then the other one is if I set up a device with Azure AD, can multiple users use that device, right? Is it? Okay, so for the first question, think of this as the evolution of workplace join. Now, workplace join was specifically for BYOD. So this is not the case in which I am logging in with my Azure AD credentials, but I'm logging in with my Microsoft account, and then I workplace join my device to my organization. By the way, in Windows 10 that will work, and actually will be better. I'll talk to that in a minute, which is the evolution of workplace join. Azure AD join is that same concept of modern protocols, but brought to the organization own device. And yes, as I briefly mentioned earlier, once you set up that device, multiple users in that organization will be able to sign into that device, and you will be able to control, who can sign into those devices, and you can know who the owner is and things like that.
The screenshot you had earlier said that it was extremely difficult to switch. Many of us are running the Windows 10 bits.
Yes.
And this feature didn't exist, when it got provisioned. Is there a way that you could switch it to test this functionality out without having to blow it away?
Okay, so again, the wording we are trying to change that, we are trying to rationalize what is exactly that we should put there. But the warning is basically to tell that user that at that moment has control of that device, that user is going to relinquish control to somebody else, to the organization, right? And depending on how, like in this particular case, you are the admin of that device, so technically you can unjoin your device, and set it up as a different device, as a personal device, if you will. But now, this functionality is actually right now. So if you go to your, by the way, who has Azure AD subscriptions already? All right, so all of you, and even those of you who didn't raise your hand, you can set up a quick, tenant or trial or something, and you can try this right now. So actually, please try that out and give us feedback. There are the new controls in the admin Azure portal. There are more that are coming, but in the client side with the latest technical preview, you have this functionality.
Exactly.
So, okay, so what's the scenario? Is it that you have a current domain join device, or you have a... Okay. Right, so in Windows 8.1, we have, the workplace join type of devices, and we have the domain join type of devices. If you upgrade any of them, you will get better experiences, but remember that Azure AD join didn't exist Azure AD join directly to Azure AD didn't exist in 8.1. So it's not that you can transform a domain join to an Azure AD join device or a workplace join to an Azure AD join device. But if you upgrade your domain join device, and this is something that I'm going to talk if we have time, is that domain join Windows 10 devices are automatically Azure AD join, if you will. So if you upgrade your 8.1 domain join device, you will automatically start looking at these new experiences of roaming of settings, of SSO to cloud, true SSO to cloud from everywhere, and things like this. Domain join doesn't use MDM for management. It would keep using GPOs and SCCM. On the other hand, if you have workplace join devices and you upgrade them, you will need to re-register those in Windows 10. But there's no path to get to Azure AD join in particular, if that makes sense. All right, so let's move on, and then let's try to see one more point that I wanted to show is, in this particular case, this is the same VM that we basically set up with Azure AD join. Once the user profile was created, the user logged on successfully, then for the first time, he or she is going to be asked to create a gesture. It could be a pin. In this particular case, we support pin. Later in the year, we'll support Windows Hello, fingerprint, and some others that will come later on. But then what it is telling Kelly in this particular case is that if you set up that gesture, you will be able to sign into Windows with that gesture moving forward. So in this case, I do create pin, and what's going to happen is that I will be asked for that pin, and who attended the Microsoft Passport again? Okay, no, not very many. Okay, so what happens at this point is that a private public keeper is generated. The private key is generated in the TPM of the device and stays there forever. It is not phishable or anything like that. The public key goes to Azure AD and registers with the user who created that key and the device who has just been registered. And then the gesture that the user has just provided will protect the private key in that device. So in other words, the only way that that private key can be unlocked to provide proof of possession of that key is by that gesture. So if you have your Windows Hello, nobody else will be able to unlock that key, therefore authenticate. So what happened here? Okay, so basically, the user is logged on, and then let me switch very quick to the presentation as we are running out of time. But so let's see very, very quick what happened. So in Windows, we have username and password, and we have the new Microsoft Passport credential. I'll walk you through what happens when you enter either that password in Windows Logon UI or that gesture. So imagine that you are on premises, you have an Azure AD join device, you enter either your password or your gesture, that credential will go to Azure AD, and Azure AD will return a token to Windows. So this token is a very special token because it's a refresh token on one hand, but it's a refresh token to multiple audiences, to multiple resources. And basically, it's to any resource that is accessed by this device while the session is going on. That's what we call a primary refresh token. It's like a very nice refresh token that will provide SSO moving forward. And then at the same time, if that Azure AD join device is at work, it's on premises, and has line of sight to a domain controller, we send those credentials to ADC, to the KDC, and then the KDC will authenticate that user and provide a very similar token, ticket, which is basically for 15 years this has been the case. It's a Kerberos TGT, ticket, granting ticket, and that is what is going to provide SSO to on-premises resources. And all this happens at WinLogon time. At the moment that Windows has those credentials, then they obtain these two SSO tokens. So with the PRT, that device can go to any AAD resource, and then it will have automatic, true SSO. Even if you don't have ADFS on premises, if you have a password hash sync configuration, that PRT will act as that SSO artifact to get you to those resources. Now, an important point here is that the settings of the applications and the on-premises, the applications or the operating system, they will go to an enterprise-compliant cloud. They won't roam to the Microsoft Consumer Cloud, but we have been working on creating a new service that will be the one who is, roaming those settings across devices. But of course, you could connect your MSA as you can do today. You can add your MSA, your Microsoft account, as a single sign-on account, and then you could have your consumer photos going to your OneDrive or your settings. If you have a consumer application, those settings will go to the consumer cloud. But if you have an enterprise application, those settings will go to the enterprise cloud. And even though for the user it doesn't make a lot of difference, for the admin it will make a huge difference. And then, of course, the TGT is then used to access printers, file servers, web servers. So effectively, you are getting true SSO across resources. Now, if you're outside of the network, with that primary refresh token, you can have direct SSO to those applications in the cloud. Of course, you won't have access to your on-premises applications because you don't have line of sight to those resources, unless you have them published through the web application proxy or through the Azure AD application proxy. Okay, so now let's talk about BYOD. So there were a couple of questions about workplace join. And what we are doing in Windows 10 is basically making that experience even better. Very similar to what Azure AD Join does, which is you authenticate, register the device, enroll the device into the MDM and download policy. That is a very similar model that we will have in the new model for BYOD. Now, the difference is that now you log on with your Microsoft account to that device, you go somewhere in settings, or even better, you launch an enterprise application for the very first time, and that application will actually trigger the flow so you can add that work account to your device. So let's take a look at Kelly again. Now, she finds that sometimes from her personal device, she wants to do some work and she doesn't want to switch devices. So here's how it will look like. So let's say that she has logged on to her personal device as Kelly at Outlook.com, and she launches Universal Word, for the first time. She can go to the settings, to the account settings of Word, and she can decide to add an account to Universal Word. Now, Word is one of those applications who support both consumer and enterprise accounts. So basically, Word is asking, okay, there's an account already in the system, which is Kelly at Outlook.com. Is the primary account, is the one who you use to log on to this device, but now you can add another account. So she adds the account, and she has the option. I can add a secondary consumer account, a secondary Microsoft account, or I can add a work or a school account. So she chooses that, and then the flow is very similar to what we've seen so far. She is asked to authenticate. She will provide second factor of authentication. Then, now this is a little bit different. she can decide that this account is going to be persisted across all applications in that device, which in this case, that's what she wants. But let's say that you are going to to your friend's house and you want to access a specific document, you can still do that, but you don't want that account to be persisted in Windows. So she says, yes, please remember this account. The account is added to Windows, and here the same flow that we went over, in which Windows obtains a token to Azure DRS, deploys a certificate that is, by the way, not deployed in the system context as the Azure AD join certificate was, but on the user context, because it's going to be just for that user. And then when they send that token to Intune or the third-party MDM and gets that token and that certificate, that's exactly what's happening here as well. So in this example, Intune or third-party MDM did have a custom terms of use URL. So for those of you who want to really customize, to say specific things that you are going to control on that device, the user will need to accept those terms of use before you can enroll that device into the MDM. So when she accepts, she will just see a progress page, and then again, she will see the Microsoft Passport gesture collection. So basically, it's telling you that when you're accessing enterprise resources from this device, even though it's personal, and you cannot use that gesture to log on to Windows, when you are going to access any enterprise resource, you will be able to do it with your gesture. So you can provide, again, some bio gesture or fingerprint or something. So next time that you go to SharePoint, maybe you just swap your finger, and then you will have SSO moving forward. And then that's it. She will just enter the PIN in this particular case. You are all set. And now she will be able to see her account from settings. Okay, question here.
Will that process be the same if she had chosen not to enroll her account across the whole device?
That's a great question. The question was, what would have happened if she didn't accept the terms of use? So to be honest, we are in that process of deciding that, and we are actually, requesting feedback to that. We have, on one hand, we said if you don't accept the MDM enrollment terms of use, you don't get MDM enrolled, your account will be added, will be workplace joined, but any resource that requires a compliant device, you won't be able to access. And it is at that very moment when you are accessing a high business impact application, let's say that requires you to be compliant, that you would need to enroll into the MDM. On the second hand, we've said, okay, maybe not. Maybe it's unified enrollment, and if you don't accept it, we roll back. We don't do anything. So any feedback that you have on those terms actually will be great.
But I was also thinking about where she has to decide if you want to use the same credentials across the application on the device, or the thing you told when she went to a friend and she just wanted to open one document and so forth.
Oh, okay.
You still have to enroll.
Oh, got it. Okay, so the question was related to the first, acceptance of terms. If she says, I don't want to remember this account, basically just a simple token is sent at that moment. Nothing is persisted on that device. Any other questions? That is correct. Yes. And they will enjoy SSO. They will enjoy a seamless experience, but in the back end are totally different backends. Okay.
If she had joined this though, and she went into Word, would it already be there or not?
If she would have done what, Azure AD join, or?
Yeah, if she had used Azure AD join and the system knew that she was connected, is Office aware of that, or?
Yes, the question is, if she would have set up the device with Azure AD account, would Office be aware of that? And the answer is yes, because that will be the primary account, and then she would have SSO from then on. Question in the back.
When a previously domain joined device is added in Azure, what happens to the old account? It's known in AD, it's known in SCCM. What happens to these information? Are they disappearing?
I'm sorry, so is the case that you have old accounts that are not in the cloud at all?
Exactly. They are in a regular domain,
Mm-hmm.
premises,
Mm-hmm.
and then Kelly chose to join Azure domain.
Okay.
What happens to previous accounts?
Okay. So the question is, what happens if Kelly had just an AD on-prem account? It was not in the cloud, has not been synchronized at all. The answer is none of these experiences will light up. Now, you could have what you can have new if you have just an on-prem only account. You can have the Microsoft Passport, so you could have Windows Hello, for example, signing to your domain join device. But things like roaming of settings and live tiles and things like that require a cloud by definition. So you would need to have that account in the cloud. In the back and then coming back to you.
What happens in a federated domain scenario where you're authenticating back down to on-premises, but the device information hasn't synced back down from Azure AD, via AD Connect? Because that's obviously like a 3 or 4 hour sync window.
Okay, so the question is, what happens if you Azure AD join your device, the device gets in the cloud, it hasn't synced back to on-prem, what happens when you access on-prem resources? So 2 things. If you access Kerberos resources, you are good because you are using your user account to get to those resources. The device is not really authenticating at that point. If you are accessing ADFS resources that rely on device authentication, you will need to wait until that device comes down. Otherwise, you won't have access.
So like an authentication to AAD just to log on to the box, doesn't that still have to refer back down to the federated system, to ADFS, even just to log on to the workstation itself?
Right, so what would happen is that when you enter your credentials, you will obtain the SSO refresh token, if you will, from the cloud. So any cloud application will have SSO at that point. And then you have your TGT, so any on-prem application, Kerberos-based, you will have. But what you won't have is that ADFS, like if you have applications that trust in ADFS. So until it comes down, you won't be able to have that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, thanks, Sam, yeah.
The Office team indicated that their tokens refreshed at a regular cadence, and their longest one was something like 90 days. If your tokens expire in this, and you have MFA or something set up, what's the user experience like?
Right. So the question is, what happens when these tokens expire, and what's the user experience? So the primary refresh token, as long as you keep using it, it will refresh, and I believe we are talking about like 60 days or something. So unless you go out on vacation for 60 days and you don't come and you don't use that device, then it will expire. But anyway, if it expires, then next time that you log on, then that PRT will be fetched. So Windows logon is very similar to what happens today with Kerberos. You are prompted. If you are in a personal device and you are coming after some long vacation, then when you launch Word, for example, then it will be a prompt. It will say, you need to authenticate before you can continue.
But does that interrupt if you do have MFA in place and you're requiring that interrupt page to pop up? Is that something that you can tie to someone walking away for 10 minutes or someone? Or does it only happen on that login and then you're never hitting the MFA again? Okay.
Yeah.
Change the 60 days, or can you put a different?
Say that again, please.
The 60 days that you mentioned, that interval, can it be increased, decreased?
Yeah, we are looking into making sure that you guys can change that as you will. But yeah, so Sam is right that there are a lot of details, but let me tell you very quick this. So you could, for example, and this is something that we're looking at, it's not there yet, but you can say something like your MFA claim will expire in 8 hours or whatever, 1 hour, 30 minutes or whatever. And that means that next time that you are going to access a resource that requires MFA, only MFA will be required. Now, with Microsoft Passport, on the other hand, given that you provisioned your gesture after you did MFA, your gesture is an MFA credential. It's a strong credential. So anytime that you swap your finger, actually you are doing MFA, if you will, and then you will keep refreshing that. All right, so actually we're out of time, and so just I wanted to show you some admin controls. We will have a blog about this, so please make sure that you take a look at it. But basically, try Azure AD Join today. Let us know, the feedback. We are still changing things, and now that we have a faster cadence to change things, please let us know all your feedback. We will really appreciate that. Don't forget to evaluate the session, and then I'll see you next year.